My wife and I moved into this neighborhood a few years ago when our oldest was just starting elementary school. We fell in love with the quiet streets and the friendly neighbors. It seemed perfect for raising a family. I even built a quarter pipe in our front yard so the kids could practice their skating. They loved it, and it was great seeing them outside having fun instead of being glued to screens all day. But then, this guy showed up. I don't know where he came from or why he decided our street was his personal racetrack, but he quickly became the bane of my existence. It started on a sunny Saturday afternoon. My kids were out skating on the quarter pipe when I heard the roar of an engine. This massive truck came tearing around the corner, driven by this burly guy with a wild look in his eyes. My daughter had just come off the quarter pipe when he floored it, speeding past our house while yelling something that sounded like, "Keep out of the road, jerks!" I was shocked. I yelled, "Slow down!" But he was already gone, leaving nothing but a cloud of dust and the echo of his engine. The next weekend, I was out mowing the lawn when I saw his truck approaching. Thinking I could reason with him, I walked to the edge of my property and tried to wave him down. Instead of stopping, he floored it again, laughing like a maniac as he sped by, his engine screaming. That's when I knew I had to do something. For the safety of my kids and everyone else in the neighborhood, I had to find a way to slow this lunatic down. My first attempt was pretty tame. I went to the hardware store and bought 3 orange safety cones. On each one I put a sign, "Slow down residential neighborhood, kids at play." I thought maybe if he saw these, he'd get the message. A few days later I came outside to find the cones had been run over. I knew exactly who did it, and I was furious. But in that anger, I had an idea. An idea so brilliant, it makes me chuckle even now. I went back to the hardware store and bought 3 new cones, along with cement and steel rebar. Over the next couple of days, I filled those cones with rebar and cement, making them heavy and immovable. Once they were set, I put them back out on the side of the street with the same signs as before. It didn't take long for the payoff. 2 days later, I was in my garage tinkering with some tools when I heard that familiar sound of his truck engine revving up. I looked up just in time to see him aim for the cones. What happened next was like something out of an action movie. His truck hit the first cone, which rotated and lifted the front of his vehicle. The second cone caught his front passenger wheel, launching the truck even higher. As it came down, the third cone smashed into his right tire suspension. His truck screeched to a halt, fluids leaking everywhere, and his passenger tire bent at a crazy angle. The guy jumped out of his truck red-faced and screaming. He yelled at me, accusing me of wrecking his truck and threatening that I would have to pay for the damages. I responded calmly, suggesting we could call the police, and he could explain to them how he was racing down a residential road and intentionally ran over safety cones. Alternatively, I offered to call him a tow truck, leaving the choice up to him. He glared at me for a moment, then grudgingly told me to just call the tow truck. I did, and that was the last time I saw him drive down our street. I was a bit worried he might try to get revenge, but nothing ever happened. We moved out a couple of years later, but I like to think I left that neighborhood a little safer than I found it. I heard that the guy ended up with a suspended license after that incident. Apparently he had a history of reckless driving, and this was the last straw. My journey into the world of HOA regulations started innocently enough with my passion for training service dogs. For the past few years, I've been volunteering to raise and train service animals. It's a rewarding experience, watching these puppies grow into loyal companions that can change someone's life. My current trainee is a black Labrador named O, and he's exceptional. At just 6 months old, he's already mastered commands that took my previous pups much longer to learn. Now, you might be wondering how this connects to HOA bylaws. Well, it all started on a Saturday morning when my fiancée and I were preparing for a road trip to visit her parents. We were going through our usual pre-trip routine, and the last item on our checklist was letting O do his business before the long drive. We headed outside and O quickly found his spot. I put him in a sit-stay, handed the leash to my fiancée, and walked about 100 feet to dispose of the waste bag in the nearby trash can. That's when I heard it, a shrill, angry screech piercing the morning air. At first I ignored it, focused on my task. But as I turned to head back, I locked eyes with the source of the commotion, a woman who perfectly fit the Karen stereotype. She was short, rotund, with a choppy haircut. Karen started screeching at me, saying that my dog needed to be on a leash and in my hand. She claimed it was county law and threatened to call the cops. I tried to remain calm, remembering that my fiancé, who owns the condo, prefers to avoid confrontation. So I attempted to de-escalate the situation. I asked her politely if she had even looked at the dog before she started yelling. Karen just kept bellowing about the dog needing to be on a leash. This back and forth continued a few times, with her ignoring my question and me repeating it. Finally, I'd had enough. I raised my voice and told her that if she had taken 2 seconds to look, she'd see the dog was sitting on a leash in someone's hands. Karen's face turned red, and she snidely suggested I could just say, "Thank you." At that point, I lost my patience and told her to shut up and get out of my face. She waddled off quickly. A few days later, I decided to do some grilling. Now I'm particular about my terminology. Grilling is not the same as barbecuing. The HOA had recently sent out a reminder about no barbecuing or using charcoal on the premises. So I got myself a small propane grill, thinking I was in the clear. As I was grilling, I heard that now familiar banshee cry. Karen was back, and she was livid. She started screaming that no grilling was allowed, and that there should be no open flames. I told her to shut up and go away, warning her that if she said one more word, I'd be the one calling the cops for harassment by an HOA member. Karen sputtered something about no grilling and open flames, but I cut her off. I told her to get lost and to show me the rule in writing, but not from her. She left, but soon returned with the HOA president and a copy of the bylaws. When they approached, my fiancée took the opportunity to introduce herself and mention an ongoing issue we were having with the HOA, one that involved the state attorney's office asking some uncomfortable questions. The atmosphere changed instantly. They became overly polite except for Karen, who tried to play the victim. She complained to my fiancé about how mean I was to her and suggested I could use some manners when engaging with people. My fiancé, usually non-confrontational, surprised me with her response. She pointed out that she was the one holding the leash and was standing right there when I was grilling. She told Karen that I had given her the same respect she had given me. The HOA president, trying to save face, told me I couldn't have the grill and threatened to call the cops next time. That's when my military background kicked in. In my 17 years of service, I've become an expert at enforcing regulations and reading instructions. So I decided to do some research, and what I found was fascinating. 1. No HOA bylaw can be enforced if it's not in the state database. 2. This HOA's bylaws were last updated in 1994, and this was happening in 2016. 3. They claim to follow the County Fire Code, which follows the National Fire Protection Association, NFPA, guidelines. 4. I found the exact coordinates of the HOA's property lines. Armed with this information, I printed out the official HOA bylaws from the state database, the NFPA guidelines, and a map of the HOA boundaries. To my delight, I discovered a drainage ditch that was city property, just 10 feet from where I had been grilling. I called the city fire department and insisted on getting a permit to grill on that spot. They thought I was being overly cautious, but I paid the $100 for a 6-month open flame event permit. The next morning at 7 a.m., I set up my grill 3 feet into the city property, loaded up with enough meat and beer for an army. It didn't take long for Karen to appear. She started screaming about no grilling and threatened to get me arrested and kicked out if it was the last thing she did. I calmly explained that I was breaking no laws, but she kept ranting. When she tried to grab my cooler, I used my best military voice to warn her off. I told her that if she so much as brushed a finger against my property, I would remove the offending body part with force if necessary. She scurried off, only to return with 2 police officers and the HOA president. They approached, clearly expecting to shut down my operation. One of the officers started listing my supposed violations, mentioning the bylaws, previous warnings, and potential tickets for disturbing the peace, illegal open flame, and illegal storage of flammable substances. He warned that if I didn't pack up, I'd be arrested. I handed him my city permit. They huddled to discuss, then came back. The officer argued that I couldn't get a permit from the city to grill on private property. That's when I pulled out my trump card, the coordinates, maps, and GPS location showing I was on city property. The officer's face changed from stern to amused. He asked me how long I had been planning this, and I told him about a week. He shook his head smirking and told me I was free to go. But I wasn't done yet. I asked if I could file a complaint for HOA harassment through him. He explained that he couldn't take the complaint directly, but he would document their harassment and file a report for me. He advised that I'd need to go to the city clerk's office for an official complaint. In my state, HOA harassment is illegal, punishable by jail time, hefty fines, and removal from the board. I guess the best way to deal with entitled people is to beat them at their own game, with patience, research, and a little bit of malicious compliance. My fiancé and I had been together for a while now, and throughout that time there was always this one friend of a friend who seemed a bit off. She'd show up uninvited to our gatherings, always trying to be the center of attention. At first we thought she was just overly friendly, but as time went on, her behavior became more and more bizarre. She'd make weird comments about how my fiancé and I weren't truly compatible, and how she knew someone who'd be a much better match for him. Anyway, fast forward to our engagement. We were over the moon and couldn't wait to share the news with everyone. That's when things really started to go downhill. The moment we announced our engagement at a small get-together, she burst into tears. Not happy tears, mind you. full-on dramatic sobbing. Everyone was stunned. She started yelling that this couldn't be happening and that we couldn't get married. When I asked her why not, she stammered that it wasn't right and that we weren't meant to be together. My fiance tried to calm her down, saying it was our decision and we were happy about it. But she insisted that we didn't understand, claiming that she was the one who was supposed to be with him. Yeah, that's right. She actually said that to my fiance, right in front of me and all our friends. Needless to say, we were all shocked. We tried to laugh it off, thinking maybe she'd had too much to drink or something. But nope, she was dead serious. From that moment on, she started a campaign to sabotage our wedding plans. She'd call our vendors pretending to be me, trying to cancel bookings. She'd spread rumors among our friends that we were having relationship troubles. It was exhausting. Despite all this, we pushed forward with our plans. We didn't want to let her craziness ruin our special day. We even decided to invite her to the wedding, hoping that maybe she'd come to her senses and behave herself. The day of the wedding arrived, and everything was perfect. The venue looked amazing, the weather was great, and I was about to marry the love of my life. Then, just as the ceremony was about to start, she showed up, in a white dress. With her own officiant, she walked down the aisle like she owned the place, pushing past our guests. She started shouting for everyone to stop the wedding, claiming it was all wrong. My fiancé demanded to know what she was doing. She replied that she was there to make things right, and that we couldn't get married that day. When I asked her why, she explained that it was the anniversary of her first date with her ex-boyfriend, which she insisted was more important than our silly wedding. I was speechless. I told her that I didn't know what was going on with her, but she needed to leave immediately. She refused, insisting that she wouldn't let this happen and that it was her day. And then, to everyone's horror, she started reciting her own vows. To my fiancé, she started professing her love for him, saying she had loved him from afar for so long. She claimed they were meant to be together and that she was his true love, not me. At this point, our best man had already called security, but before they arrived, she made one last, desperate move. She tried to grab my fiancé and kiss him. That was the last straw for me. I'm not usually a violent person, but in that moment, something in me snapped. I grabbed my bouquet and whacked her over the head with it, yelling at her to get her hands off my husband and calling her a crazy witch. She stumbled backward, looking shocked. That's when security finally showed up and started dragging her away. When they were pulling her out, she kept shouting that they couldn't do this, that the real wedding was still in progress and that she was the bride. My fiancé turned to me with a grin and joked that this was one way to start our married life with a bang. Once she was gone, we decided to just roll with it. We asked our officiant to start the ceremony over, but this time we added a line to our vows about promising to always have each other's backs, in sickness, in health, and in case of wedding crashers. The rest of the day was amazing. Our friends couldn't stop talking about what happened, but instead of letting it ruin things, it became this shared moment that brought everyone closer together. We danced, we laughed, we celebrated our love, and we even raised a toast to the uninvited guest who gave us the craziest wedding story ever. Everything in my life was going great until she showed up, a woman who would turn our peaceful park into a battleground. She arrived one day with a tiny Pomeranian making an outrageous announcement. She claimed her dog was royalty, a direct descendant of Queen Victoria's Pomeranian, and demanded special treatment for it. The woman insisted that other dogs should bow to her Pomeranian and that the park should be cleared for its private playtime daily. When a regular park goer laughed off her demands, she became indignant. I tried to reason with her, explaining that the park was for everyone to share. She responded by threatening legal action and storming out. She filed complaints with the city council about violations of her dog's royal rights. When these were dismissed, she started showing up daily, demanding other dogs bow to her Pomeranian. She'd throw tantrums when ignored, constantly threatening legal action. Things escalated when she tried to physically remove another dog from the park during her self-proclaimed royal playtime. I confronted her, telling her she couldn't do that as she didn't own the park. She retorted that her dog's needs were more important than others. In her attempt to shoo away another dog, she accidentally let go of her Pomeranian's leash. The little dog ran off to play with the others, ignoring her frantic calls to return. She scolded the dog, telling it not to mingle with commoners. Seeing the supposedly royal Pomeranian act like a normal dog sent us all into fits of laughter. Humiliated, the woman left with her now dirty prince. But it wasn't over. She sued several of us for emotional distress, claiming we refused to acknowledge her dog's royal status. Fortunately, the judge dismissed the case and warned her about filing frivolous lawsuits. The city council even fined her for disturbing the peace at the park. Peace finally returned to our pet park, leaving us with an insane story about the woman who thought she could turn a public park into a royal court for her Pomeranian.